which had proved to be parasitized. And we had a look at the parasitic larva burrowing its way out of the body of the caterpillar. Well, that larva then went on to spin up and pupate, formed into a pupa, and sometime between last Sunday and yesterday, it's eclosed. That means the adult form has come out. So I thought we'd have a quick look at that today, just to finish off the sequence from the last one. So we'll have a quick look in the pot first of all. I put it in a fairly large pot that I was rearing it in, which no point looking at me is there when I do that. Let's turn the camera around. And hopefully this will choose to focus on the insect if I do this right. See if I can get it to focus. So maybe you can see that crawling around in there. We will have a closer look a bit later. It's Hymenopteran, something like something in the wasp bees type of insect family. And emerged from its pupa, as I say, sometime in the last week. I wasn't down here this week to see exactly which day. It was definitely still in a pupal stage on Sunday last, and it was out yesterday when I got down here. You can see the now empty pupa there, the pupal exuvia, so the shed skin. So what I'm going to do to identify these things, you definitely need to, let me see if I can see it anymore. Where's it gone? Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So to identify these things, you do need to kill the specimens and examine them closely. And I probably will, I almost certainly will in this, need to share it with someone much more expert than I am on this group. So I'm going to have to kill that off, and I'm going to do that in that jar that you can possibly see over there, next to where it says magic wands. Don't worry about saying magic wands, just and that jar has in it a chemical called ethyl acetate, which just acts to kill the insects. It's not particularly harmful chemical to work with, not particularly harmful to human health, which is why I can work with it. But it does do a lot of damage to plastics. So I'm keeping the camera and electronic equipment away from it because it can start to damage circuit boards if you expose them too much to the fumes. But that jar has been charged with this chemical, and I'm going to put this creature in there now. And that will kill it off. Okay. So that is in there now. Sealed up. It's just an old jam jar. So professionals would do this much better than me. And that will kill off the adult parasite. So I'm just going to leave it there for a few minutes to do that. So whilst we're doing that, I thought we'll have a quick wander into the reserve and have a look at some other insects I'm rearing on at the moment, just to pass the time whilst that thing is dying off, is being killed. So in here, you can see a pupa of a moth. This is of a noctuid moth, and we did find the caterpillar of this back in January, or back in December, I think it was, on one of these broadcasts, and just been keeping it here, rearing it on, to see what it will turn into when it eventually closes. I'm going to wander out into the reserve now. As I do that, I will go off the Wi-Fi network, so the signal will break up a little bit, but then should come back when the cellular data kicks in. So bear with me if this slightly breaks up, and I'm going to have to lock up the building as we go, just for security. Not that it's particularly high risk, but someone just locked up there. And we'll go just briefly into the reserve here and into the little shed I'm using for the insects I'm rearing. Very poor here, and hopefully is now coming back as the 4G kicks in. So we're off the Wi-Fi network and we're back on the cellular data. I'm going into the woods here where you can see spring is rapidly advancing through the woods. Lots of bluebells, lots of greater stitchwort there. Starting to see the trees coming into leaves. Some of the hazel here has got some lovely fresh leaves on it now, so we're getting some spring. And then we're going to go up to this shed where I've got various insects being looked after, and a sign to tell people what it is, because you've got to tell people what it is. So in here we've got several pupae of buff tip moth. We saw the caterpillars, and I think I did a broadcast with those caterpillars. It would have been around September, October last year when we had a look at the caterpillars. But they've now pupated, and later in the year they will come out. So that's those ones. Got a few others we'll have a quick look at, and then we'll go back and see how we're getting on with the parasitoid that we were looking at. So here in this container we've got another pupa of a moth. Structurally it looks like a moth pupa. I suspect one of the Noctuidae, but this was found yesterday as a pupa by one of the children at our junior section, what we call the Rangers. They were looking for invertebrates and one of them found this, so I thought I'll keep this. I will rear it on, see what it produces, see what it turns into. I will transfer it to a slightly better container than this shortly. It's just in here as a holding pot. But that is a Noctuid pupa that we had there. And then in this container here, somewhere, there is a caterpillar that's hiding on the side. Just give me a second to get the lid off. Put the camera down whilst I do that, if you don't mind. Much more stiff than it was yesterday. So, inside here, I saw it minutes ago, is a caterpillar of, I think this is lesser yellow underwing moth. I will rear it on to see what it is. It seems to be taking the bramble as a food source and producing a little bit of frass or caterpillar poo there. So that should be okay, it should survive. And hopefully will go on pupillate and then come out close, and we can see what it was, what it is. So I just had a quick look at them just to pass the time whilst we're waiting for the ethyl acetate to do its work on the parasitic creature that we were looking at before. We'll go back and have a look at that now and do a bit of photography of it and try and find out, well, let's get some images to help with the identification. So we'll go back now to the Bluewell Centre. So we're not spending a lot of time out in the wood on this broadcast. We've been getting rid of some of the rubbish here. Some of our volunteers have been dealing with some of the rubbish that we wouldn't otherwise be able to get rid of on the site. Filling this skip, that'll be taken away. So there we go, that's what's going on there. Right, we'll go back into the building and hopefully the ethyl acetate will have done its work. Oops, wrong key. Let me just unlock and let us in. Back into the building. There we go. I'm doing. So you can watch the working photography of it. Not the most exciting thing to watch, but there we go. Macro lens on the camera, got a ring light to give an even lighting. What I will do, I've already set up things like white balance and exposure and so on. I'll just turn the image stabilization off and turn autofocus off and manually focus this. You don't really get the precision of focus that you want doing this sort of thing. Manually. Now, we're trying in first instance get the wing venation in focus because the wing patterns are often important here. I've got it on a remote, so I'm not touching the camera when I take the picture. Take a couple. I'll also stick a ruler next to it to give a sense of scale. There are more scientific ways to do this, but the card it's being photographed on is a photographer's grey card, so it's a 90%, what's called a 90% grey card. Effectively, that means it's a known colour, it's a known shade, and that just makes life a bit easier when it comes to calibrating the colours in case that's important. Very gently try and turn this over. Okay. Take a picture of it the other way up. Really hard to get the wing veins in focus, because that's usually a useful feature for things like this. And then I'll take one where I change the focal plane and just bring it up ever so slightly to try and get the body slightly more in focus. I've got it at a fairly wide f-stop, so it should be pretty well in focus throughout. I'll do one of those with a ruler as well. There we go. Just to avoid any accidents whilst I'm working on it and whilst I'm talking, I'm going to put a pot over there. And then what we can do is have a look on the back of the camera at some of the images just to give you a bit more a sense of what we've been looking at. So, turn this camera around again. So here you've got the picture of it. You've got the ruler there with the divisions in millimeters, which will give you some sense of what sort of size we're talking about. And if you zoom in, you can see hopefully some details of that structure on the wings. Not as sharp as I'd like it to be. Try and take a few more of these, I think. So we've got some idea of what this is, or we'll be able to try and work it through. I say, I think it's something in the Parasitica, which isn't a real taxonomic group. I think it might be an ichneumon of some kind. But this isn't a group I have any real expertise on, so I'll be having to do a bit of research to see where I can get to, and then probably talking to someone who knows far better than me what they are doing. But with any luck, that will allow us to identify it. Or will allow, well, I'll actually be very surprised if it's identifiable from photographs, but it might. I'll have this as a specimen. And then what I'm going to do, once I've finished photographing it, I'm going to glue it to a little piece of card here. It's got a point. Put a tiny bit of glue on the end. You glue it on there. Then that can be pinned into the collection, and it will allow it to be examined more effectively. So that's my next task once I finish the photography. I'm not going to show us doing that. So what I think we'll do is we will end the broadcast here, just having a look at the image here on the back of the camera of some sort of interesting Hymenopteran parasite that was living in a noctuid caterpillar earlier in a few weeks back that we saw on here. So there we go. That's all today's was going to be. Quick look at something that I find really interesting, these parasites, way beyond my ability to identify or make much contribution to the science of, to be honest. But hopefully with this one, if we can identify it, we've got some interesting shots of the larva. We've got some interesting shots of the larva spinning up. We've got pictures of the pupa, so that might be interesting to people who study these. Right, I'm going to sign off now and get on with doing a bit more photography and pointing of this insect. Thanks everyone.